these things go unchallenged. I'll hand it in, see what happens, and I'll just make some comments to you. Kalaji says his point one is that the censorship law neither creates an enforceable federal right nor gives rise to an implied private right of action permitting public access producers to enforce the statute against cable operators. Glendora says this is not so, and that Kalaji repeats himself, and that Perry, in his April 24th brief, brilliantly refutes this Kalaji point. Kalaji says that plaintiff Manny failed to demonstrate that Congress intended to create an implied private right of action in favor of public access producers, permitting them to enforce the censorship law. Cablevision broke the censorship law. Of course I have a right to enforce it. Kalaji does not tell it as it is. Glendora did in her SIR reply of March the 28th, 1995. Perry did in his brief of April the 24th. When Congress wished to provide a private remedy to enforce sections of the Cable Act, Kalaji said it knew how to do so and did so expressly and repeatedly. Kalaji repeats his argument. It's repetitious. Glendora says this is not so. This argument has no validity. Kalaji is repeating himself. There is nothing new here. And Kalaji says that Congress provided an alternative enforcement mechanism, and Glendora says it is one thing to break a law of Congress, to try to lie out of it this way is a sacrilege to the remembrance of the 50th anniversary of VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, 2 days ago. Kalaji, not one iota of legislative history suggests that Congress intended courts to create an implied private right of action. And Glendora says this is breaking new ground. The history has to start somewhere. Let it start right here and now with fining and jailing Cablevision by August the 1st, 1995. Kalaji says Congress has not, by its silence, acquiesced in an alleged judicial creation of such a remedy. Glendora says this holds no water at all. Why would Congress make a law and provide no means for its enforcement? Professor Perry hammers this to bits. Kalaji says that the censorship law was not enacted for the special benefit of public access producers such as Glendora. Glendora says this shows no intelligence. Kalaji does not care how ridiculous this sounds. He gets paid anyway. That's a run-on sentence. Put in a semicolon. He stretches reply affidavit out to 42 pages because he gets paid by the ounce, minute, and paragraph. Kalaji says that private enforcement is inconsistent with the underlying purposes of the legislative scheme. Glendora says that it's just the opposite. Kalaji has it upside down. Kalaji, enforcement of cable television regulation is traditionally delegated to state law, and Glendora says that, well, when Kalaji's in federal court, he talks about state court. B, what he says is not so. 11, Kalaji includes the ruling about public access by the New York Commission on Cable Television that public access has to be a local community generator. Glendora's program is on Nassau Cablevision. Glendora called the State TV Cable Commission on the ruling Kalaji included. Mr. Figliosi says it is not a new rule. Governor Pataki has put a moratorium on new rules. It is one of their old rules in the 594.4 section that they reinterpreted. Glendora asked, can you give me an example? Mr. Figliosi thought a while. Glendora said, well, for instance, suppose a public access producer in, say, Smithtown, New York, wanted to get his show on cable TV 100 miles away on another cable TV system. Mr. Figliosi says, oh yes, well, if a public access producer in Smithtown wanted to get his program on a system, we'll say in Buffalo, he would get somebody in Buffalo to submit it to the Buffalo cable system. Glendora, would that be what you call a sponsor? Mr. Figliosi, yes, exactly. Glendora, just as long as you have a person within the community to sponsor it. Mr. Figliosi, yes. Well, Judge Bryant, this is exactly what Glendora has in Nassau, as well as the Suffolk towns of Huntington, Babylon, and Iceland, and what she has had ever since September 1993, when Cablevision Nassau and those 3 towns in Suffolk called Cablevision of Long Island and had Glendora find a sponsor and sign a contract. Glendora also took their community workshop in public access production and set up editing appointments in Hicksville. The conversation with Figliosi is on audio tape, loud and clear. Glendora sent Judge Bryant the name and address of her sponsor and copies of the contract with these papers is another copy of one of the contracts that was received. This is a contract with a cable TV company for public access. That's called an application. And here's the contract. Page 1, page 2, page 3.